She walked through 60 miles of snow with a baby pressed to her chest and collapsed at the gate of a man who didn't ask questions, just opened the door. But behind the kindness is a town ready to turn her in, and a sheriff with a grudge. Before we dive in, leave a comment letting us know where you're watching from and hit the subscribe button. The dogs were the first to know something wasn't right, their barks slicing through the thick hush of snowfall like alarm bells. Cole Maddox stood from the hearth, still chewing the last bite of jerky, and pulled on his coat without a word. The wind met him like a slap when he opened the door, his boots sinking into snow halfway to the knee. But he moved quick, rifle slung on his back more out of habit than need. He hadn't expected what he found at the gate. A woman no more than a fragile heap of shawls and skirts was, slumped forward against the wooden post, as if she'd been crawling the last few feet. Her arms wrapped something small and unmoving, held to her chest like the last ember of a dying fire. Her face was half frozen, lashes heavy with ice, lips cracked and purple. But her eyes flicked up when she saw him, and in them was a fire stronger than any he'd lit in that cabin. She didn't speak, didn't beg, just whispered, hoarse and raw, "Help him," and looked down at the bundle in her arms. Cole knelt beside her, pushing back the layers with rough, thawed hands, and what he found made his throat tighten. A baby, blue-lipped, eyes barely fluttering, breath as thin as a thread. "He's burning up," Cole muttered, already pulling the blanket tighter, lifting the baby with one arm and wrapping the other around the woman. "You're both freezing." She tried to speak again but collapsed against his shoulder. He carried them in like a man carries something sacred, careful, steady, praying under his breath to a god he hadn't spoken to in years. Inside, he laid the baby near the fire and stripped the woman's coat off, revealing torn gloves and a dress soaked through from snow. He worked quickly boiling water, crushing herbs, warming stones in the fire and wrapping them in cloth. He didn't ask who she was. Not yet. There would be time for that, if she lasted the night. The baby whimpered weakly, and Cole leaned in close, holding a spoon of warm milk against its lips. "Come on, little one, don't go now." The baby sucked just enough to stay alive. Cole looked over at the woman. She was breathing, shallow and slow, eyes closed, mouth murmuring something he couldn't hear. He leaned in. It sounded like a name. "Micah!" The wind screamed outside, and the walls groaned with cold. Cole sat back, watching the flames lick higher, and tried to piece together the story. She must have walked from town, or farther, through that storm. But why? And why clutch the baby, like the world was hunting him? As the night dragged on, Cole dozed in the rocker, rifle across his lap, boots still on. He'd seen women arrive before mail-order brides, sent west with hope and desperation, packed in equal measure. Most were scooped up by lonely ranchers or merchants needing someone to cook and bear children. Some got lucky, some didn't. But this woman who arrived half dead with a child in her arms, she wasn't anyone's bride now, she was something else. By dawn, the storm had slowed to a whisper. Cole woke to the sound of coughing. Not from the baby, but from her. She sat up slowly, eyes wide with fear as she looked around, and when she saw him, her body flinched, like she'd already been struck before. "You're safe," he said softly. "You're in my home? Fire's going. Milk's warm. That baby's breathing." She blinked hard, as if trying to believe him. You didn't call the sheriff?" Her voice was dry paper. Cole shook his head. "Didn't see reason to. Thought you needed a fire more than a badge." Tears slipped down her face, and she looked at the baby, then back at him. "He was going to marry me," she whispered. "Said he would. Sent letters. Then I showed up with Micah, and he told me to get off his land. Said the baby wasn't his, that no man would take in an outlaw's son." Cole's jaw tightened. "You walked through this?" 60 miles, she whispered. "No one would take me. The trains don't stop for women with bastard children. So I walked." Her head dropped, and for a moment Cole didn't know what to say. Then he stood and poured her a tin cup of broth, placed it gently in her hands. "You didn't give up," he said. "That counts for something." She looked up at him with tired, thankful eyes, and though she didn't speak, he saw something there. Not just pain, grit. He sat beside her, not touching, just near enough so she knew she wasn't alone anymore. Snow still drifted outside, but inside the cabin, the fire held steady and so did the three hearts beating near it. The sound of hooves cracking frozen earth came before the knock, and by then Cole already had the woman and baby hidden in the back room, wrapped in blankets thick enough to muffle their breathing. She didn't argue when he told her to stay quiet, just clutched the baby closer and nodded with wide, hollow eyes that looked too young to have seen so much. Cole opened the door with the kind of calm only a rancher learns, pretending his gut wasn't twisted into knots. Sheriff Bram Weller stood on the porch, frost in his beard and suspicion in his eyes. "Mornin', Cole," he said, voice slow like molasses that had gone cold. "Heard there was a woman came through Fort Wynn last night. Some say she had a baby with her. You see anyone come this way?" Cole leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, squinting out at the rising sun just enough to seem tired. "Ain't seen a soul. Storm pretty much buried everything south of the ridge. Surprised your horse made it." Weller's eyes narrowed, but he didn't press yet. "She's mail order, far as I heard. Promised to a fella named Dunn up north, but showed up with a kid in her arms and no proof of nothing. Dunn says he don't want her. Says the baby ain't his. That the girl's probably hiding from something." Cole kept his face steady. "That right? Town's been full of gossip lately. I figured folks had better things to do than chase rumors about women with babies." Weller stepped down from the saddle, boots crunching in the frost. "If you do see her, Cole, I'm telling you plain she don't belong out here alone with a sick child and no name to give. Dunn says she's trouble, and if she's harboring an outlaw's child, I got to bring her in. There's laws for a reason." Cole shifted just enough to block the door more fully with his body. "What if she's not trouble? What if she's just cold, abandoned, and holding on to the only thing left in this world that ain't lied to her?" Weller tilted his head. "You seen her then?" Cole didn't answer, didn't blink, just stared back like the land itself unyielding and full of quiet fury. Weller sighed and looked past him toward the tree line. "You always did take in strays. That old sheepdog you had in '76? Same damn look in its eyes as you've got now." He swung back into his saddle. "Just saying, Cole, if she's here, and if that baby's got outlaw blood, I'll be back. Next time, I won't be asking." When Weller rode off, Cole shut the door and bolted it tight. Inside, the fire had dimmed, but the back room was still warm. She looked up at him from the corner, hair loose now, cheeks flushed from holding her breath. "You lied," she whispered. "You could have turned me in." "Could have," he said, sitting across from her. "Didn't." "Why?" Her voice cracked like dry bark. He stared at the baby Micah sleeping with one tiny fist curled against her chest. "Because that child ain't done a thing wrong. And because a woman who walks 60 miles through snow ain't the kind that folds easy. I figure folks like you are worth keeping around." She blinked, lips parting, but no words came. Her name still hadn't come out, and Cole didn't push. Some wounds were slow to speak. He brought her soup, let her eat in silence, and when the baby whimpered, he helped warm a cloth and whispered steady while she rocked him. Later that night, she finally spoke more than a few words. "My name's Miriam," she said. "I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door." Cole nodded once. "You didn't. The snow did that." She smiled, a soft, flickering thing that passed quicker than a candle caught in a draft, but it was real, the first he'd seen. Micah's father was a good man. Kind, but he was Cheyenne. Folks don't take kindly to that, not where I come from. They said if I kept the baby, I'd lose everything, so I left. Cole stared into the fire, jaw clenched. "This land's big enough for better than that." "Is it?" she asked. "Or does it just feel wide when you're alone in it?" Her question sat in the room like smoke. Cole didn't answer, didn't know how. Instead, he stood and stoked the fire, adding more wood, making sure it would burn steady through the night. "You can stay," he said finally. "But we'll need a plan. Weller's not a man who forgets." Miriam nodded, pulling the baby closer to her chest. "I'll earn my keep." "You already did," Cole said, "when you didn't leave that baby behind." By morning, the sky had turned from steel, gray to white, heavy with snow still clinging to the branches like it didn't want to let go. But inside the cabin, the real storm had begun. Micah's little body burned hot against Miriam's chest, and when she reached to wake him, his skin was slick and his breath came in faint, wheezing gasps that sounded like wind dying against wood. She held him tighter, whispered prayers she hadn't spoken since childhood, and tried not to panic as she stood barefoot on the floorboards, rocking him gently, as if motion alone might coax life back into him. Cole was already at the stove, heating water with a worried look that gave away more than he'd say out loud. "Fever's bad," he muttered, glancing over. "How long's it been like this?" "He was warm last night," Miriam said, voice thin and shaking. "But I thought it was just the fire. This morning he's not crying. He always cries when he's hungry. Now he just lays quiet." Cole didn't speak. He poured hot water into a basin and pulled down clean cloths from a shelf she hadn't noticed before. "Strip him down. We'll cool his body. Not too fast or too much. Just steady. You sit there, rock him. I'll help." And help he did. He worked with a quiet urgency, dipping cloths into the basin, wringing them out, pressing them gently to the baby's neck and chest and limbs with hands that were used to fixing fences and shoeing horses, but somehow found the exact weight to press without hurting. Miriam sat there, arms aching, throat closed up, watching steam rise from the cloths like ghosts leaving a battlefield. Every now and then, Cole would look at her, just a glance, as if he were checking to make sure she hadn't fallen apart completely. She hadn't, not yet, but her bones were hollow with fear. "There's a woman," Cole said suddenly. "Old healer out near Dry Creek. Folks call her Miss June. She ain't got much time for strangers but knows her herbs better than most doctors. Can she help him?" Miriam asked, barely above a whisper. "Maybe. But she's 3 miles through snow and half of it uphill. I don't know if I'd make it there and back in time." "I'll go," Miriam said, standing so fast her head spun. "You won't," Cole said, rising to block the door. "You ain't strong enough. And if you fall, he's got no one." "Then what?" she asked, eyes wet now, jaw trembling. "I can't sit here and watch him die. I can't." "I'll ride," Cole said. "I'll leave now. You stay here. Keep the fire up. Cool him. Talk to him. Even if he don't answer, let him hear your voice. That matters." "What if the sheriff comes back?" she asked. "Then you don't answer the door," he said. "And if he breaks it down?" Cole looked at her, long and hard. "Then you fight like hell, same as you did to get here." And with that, he saddled up, wrapped a scarf around his face, and disappeared into the white world. A dark figure swallowed by the snow within seconds. Miriam did as he said. She sang lullabies in a language her mother once used, wiped Micah's forehead every few minutes, and lit every lamp in the cabin like it would somehow keep the shadows from closing in. The hours bled together, thick and shapeless, marked only by the rise and fall of the baby's chest. When his breathing hitched, she held her breath. When he whimpered, she wept with relief. The storm pressed on the windows, howled through the cracks, and still Cole didn't return. Night fell, a creeping thing with no remorse, and the firewood was running low. She fed it sparingly, whispering apologies to the flames each time she took another log. Her hands were blistered from wringing the cloths, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Not when the only thing between that baby and death was her stubbornness. Then just after midnight, a knock, not a bang, not a sheriff's fist, a knock. She froze. Another knock, softer. "Miriam?" Cole's voice, hoarse and tired. She yanked the door open, and there he stood, covered in snow, holding a pouch of herbs and a bottle with a wax seal and a look that said he hadn't stopped writing since he left. "Miss June says fever root and willow bark. Mix it with water. Cool him from the inside too. And this," he handed her the bottle. "Honey and vinegar, tiny sips. Keep him awake if you can." She didn't ask how he convinced Miss June. She didn't ask how fast he rode, or how hard he'd pushed himself to make it back before the worst. She just took the pouch with both hands and whispered, "Thank you." They worked through the night, administered the tinctures, fought the fever like it was a living thing trying to steal him. And as dawn broke, pale and gold and quiet, Micah opened his eyes. Just for a moment, just enough. Miriam let out a cry that sounded like a prayer, and a sob, and something ancient all at once. Cole sat back, bone-tired, and watched her kiss the baby's forehead with a tenderness that made the whole room feel warmer. "He's not out of the woods yet," Cole said. "But he's fightin', and he's got a mama who won't give up. That counts for something." The fire popped once as the log cracked down the middle, and Miriam didn't flinch, her body too wrung out from the hours before, too focused on the slow rise and fall of Micah's chest, now eased by the bitter medicine and the lull of sleep that no longer felt like surrender but healing. Cole sat near the door, hat low over his eyes, though she could tell he wasn't asleep either. They were two people too tired to speak, too worn down to rest, keeping a vigil for a baby who might still slip away if either of them blinked too long. But sometime past dawn, the silence between them cracked. "You gonna tell me your name?" Cole asked. Not cruel, not pressing, but as gently as a man could ask, after seeing a woman bleed her heart dry for a child. Miriam looked down at her hands. They were cracked from the cold, knuckles red, the skin under her nails raw from cleaning fever off a baby too small to understand what the world had already done to him. "Names don't mean much," she said finally. "Not when the man who wrote it on a paper in exchange for a ring saw me and changed his mind." Cole didn't answer right away. He reached for a kettle on the stove, poured warm water into a cup, and brought it over without asking if she wanted it. "Man like that never knew what a promise meant," he said. "A child gets born, and the first thing he sees is someone turn their back. That ain't the baby's shame." "He took one look," Miriam whispered, voice trembling. "Saw the baby in my arms and asked me whose it was. I told him the truth, and he shut the door in my face. I didn't even beg. I just turned and walked. I think I knew I wasn't begging for him. I was begging for a lie to be true." "That man doesn't get your tears," Cole said. "You carried a baby through 60 miles of snow. That makes you a warrior. That makes you a mother." Something inside her cracked then, not broken like before, but like a frozen lake beginning to thaw. "I was promised to a man named Jeb Carter," she said. "He wrote letters. He said he had a farm. Said he didn't mind if I'd been in trouble before. He said he knew what it meant to start over." "Jeb Carter don't live far from here," Cole said, and she heard the edge tighten in his voice. "Runs cattle on the edge of Harper's Ridge. Folks say he's meaner than his dogs." "I didn't know," Miriam said. "Didn't know he was cruel. I just needed a place. And when the nuns sent the letter back, he accepted. I thought maybe Micah could have a father. Maybe he wouldn't grow up with people calling him names. I thought he could be someone's son. Not just my shame." Cole looked over at the baby, still resting in the cot near the stove. "He don't look like shame to me. He looks like a reason." For the first time, she met his eyes fully. What if the sheriff comes back? What if Jeb says I stole from him? He could claim I never had a right to be here. I have nothing, no papers, no family. No one to say I belong anywhere. "That baby says it," Cole said. "Every breath he takes, every cry, every time he opens his eyes and sees you first. That's all the belonging you need. If Jeb comes looking, he'll have to come through me." "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do that for someone you don't know?" Cole stood slowly, walked to the door, then turned to face her. "Because you didn't run when the road turned cruel. You kept walking. You held that baby like he was gold. I seen women give up for less, and men do worse when no one's watching. But you crossed a storm and didn't drop what mattered. That counts for something in my world." Miriam let the words settle like falling ash. She sipped the water, still warm. The silence between them felt different now, not empty, but waiting. A new kind of quiet. Then she said, "My name is Miriam Lee." It felt strange to say it again, like brushing off a name that had been buried under too many lies and too much cold. Cole nodded once. "Miriam," he repeated, like it mattered, like the name itself had earned its place back in the world. "Well, you and Micah can stay as long as you need. Ain't no one's business but mine who sleeps under this roof." Outside, the wind howled and the snow kept falling, but inside that cabin something had changed. The woman who came to the ranch gate half dead had spoken her name again, and the man who opened the door hadn't just let her in, he'd drawn a line no sheriff or scorned suitor could cross. A name meant something now. And for the first time in a long time, Miriam Lee wasn't hiding. The morning came gray and bitter, the kind of cold that crept through walls and pressed against the skin no matter how many logs burned in the stove. Miriam stood at the window with Micah bundled in her arms, his tiny fists tucked under his chin as he slept against her chest, warm and safe for the first time in days. She watched the frost crawl along the pane like a warning, and in the silence she felt that something was coming. Cole was already outside, chopping wood by the barn, his breath clouding the air, his shoulders moving steady and strong, like nothing in the world could shake him. But the quiet didn't last. Hoofbeats, slow and heavy, came down the trail, and she froze, the sound of one rider too deliberate to be neighborly. Miriam pressed Micah closer and turned from the window just as the door opened and Cole stepped in, jaw tight. "It's the sheriff," he said, voice low. "Stay here." She didn't ask which sheriff. She didn't have to. There was only one lawman for 50 miles who could ride this far without worry. Sheriff Tate. She'd heard his name whispered in places where women slept with knives under their pillows and men flinched at shadows. Miriam stayed near the stove, her body braced, rocking Micah gently, while Cole stepped back outside. The door shut behind him, and she strained to hear. "Morning, Maddox," came the voice, rough and drawled, the kind that didn't care whether it brought news or trouble. "Heard you had some company, a woman and a babe. That right?" "You heard wrong," Cole replied, flat, as the land they stood on. "I don't get many visitors in the middle of winter." "Well," the sheriff said, the creak of his saddle audible as he shifted, "seems a man named Jeb Carter came riding into town yesterday, all worked up. Says he sent for a bride who showed up with a bastard child and tried to lay claim to his land. Says she ran off with food, blankets, and a rifle that wasn't hers. Sounds like a man trying to cover up the fact that he broke his word," Cole said. "What's that got to do with me?" "Folks said she might have headed this way," the sheriff continued. "If she's here, I gotta take her in. Law says theft's theft. Carter's pressing charges." "Carter's a liar," Cole said plainly. "And that woman ain't no thief. She's a mother who got left in the snow." Miriam's breath caught. Her eyes burned. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling between boards. "You protecting her?" the sheriff asked. "Even if she's carrying another man's child? Even if it means you're harboring a fugitive?" Cole didn't answer at first. Then his voice came, firm as iron. "I'm protecting what's right." There was a pause, long and dangerous. Miriam's heartbeat thudded so hard it echoed in her ears. Then the sheriff said, "You know this'll bring trouble, Maddox. Carter's got friends, town folk who'll side with him just to stay in his good graces. I can't look the other way forever." "Then don't," Cole said. "Do what you have to. But if you step foot on my land without a warrant, I'll treat it like trespass." The silence that followed was colder than the snow. Then came the sound of reins pulled taut, hooves crunching in retreat, and the sheriff's final words thrown over his shoulder. "You'd better be real sure, Maddox, 'cause when the law comes back, it won't be askin'." The sound of the horse faded. The wind kept howling. And still, Cole didn't come back inside right away. When he finally did, he looked older, angrier, carved deeper by something heavier than cold. He took off his coat, didn't look at her right away. "He'll be back," he said. "With papers and men to enforce them." "You shouldn't have lied for me," Miriam said softly. "If they find out I'm here, they already know," he interrupted. "That man never wanted justice. He wanted to save face. He wanted to make an example of you, and I won't let him. But if they drag me away, what happens to Micah?" she whispered. "They'll put him in an orphan house. Say he's better off without me." "No," Cole said, walking toward her. "He stays here, with you. And if I have to stand on that porch with a shotgun and face down every man in this territory, then that's what I'll do." His voice cracked then, just enough to let her see past the stoicism. "I've lost enough good in this life. I won't lose this." Miriam's knees almost buckled. She lowered herself onto the edge of the bed, Micah still warm in her arms, and looked at this manthus stranger who had become her refuge. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "I didn't earn this kindness." Cole knelt in front of her, one hand resting lightly on Micah's tiny foot. "Because I watched you fight a storm to protect a child no one else would claim. Because I see the way he breathes easier when you hold him. Because every man has a moment where he gets to choose who he is, and this is mine. Miriam couldn't stop the tears then. She let them fall silently, one by one, over Micah's downy head. Outside, the snow thickened again. But inside the cabin, something fierce and unbreakable had been born. Not in law, not in blood, but in love. Love that stood between a mother and the world, and dared it to try her. The days passed like smoke drifting through a canyon, slow and heavy, full of unseen danger. The sheriff hadn't returned, not yet, but his words still echoed through Cole's mind every time he checked the fence line or saw a bird rise sudden from the trees. Trouble was coming. He could feel it in his bones, in the way the horses were restless in the early hours, in the way even the sun seemed cautious breaking through the clouds. Miriam tried to make herself small in the cabin, tried not to be a burden, though she already wasn't. She took to cleaning without asking, fixing meals from scraps, knitting Micah's swaddles tighter with spare yarn from a box in the loft. But it was her silence that shouted the loudest. She didn't speak unless spoken to, never sat down while Cole was standing, and never asked for anything, not even when her hands bled from the cold water in the wash basin. Cole saw it all. And it burned in him, that she thought she had to earn her right to stay alive, that somewhere along the way someone had taught her survival came with strings, and love was a thing given only in exchange for pain. That night, just after dusk, Micah started fussing more than usual. Miriam rocked him, humming gently, but something was off. His cheeks were flushed, deep red, his breath quick. She unwrapped him and felt his belly, then turned her face toward Cole with the kind of fear no mother should have to carry. "He's burning up," she whispered. Cole was already at her side. "How long?" "Just started," she said. "He was fine at lunch. A little warm, but now—" Her voice cracked. "He's not nursing. He won't even cry properly. It's like he's too tired to fight." Cole didn't hesitate. He pulled on his coat and grabbed a lantern. "There's a woman 5 miles west," he said. "A healer, married to a Métis trapper. If anyone can help, it's her." "You can't," Miriam said. "Not in the dark, not on snow this deep. Watch me." Cole was already in the barn, saddling his fastest mare, the one with iron in her hooves and fire in her eyes. Miriam wrapped Micah tighter, pressing her lips to his forehead, whispering prayers in languages she hadn't used since she was a child. Cole came back in, took the baby into his arms just long enough to see the color draining from his lips. Then he passed him back gently and nodded. "Keep the fire hot. I'll be back before midnight." He left without another word. The wind slammed the door behind him, and for hours the cabin became a shrine. Miriam fed the fire like it was the only thing keeping her baby breathing. She whispered stories and songs, poured cool water on cloth, and laid it across Micah's skin. But his eyes fluttered, dull and glassy, and his hands had gone still. She thought of the man who had sent her away, the one who saw Micah and turned to ice, the one who spat the word half-breed like it was a curse. She thought of the law that wanted her behind bars, not because she'd done wrong, but because she had no one powerful enough to say otherwise. And she thought of Cole, riding through the dark for a child who wasn't his, on a trail barely visible even by daylight. When the knock came, her heart nearly burst. She flung open the door, and it wasn't Cole. It was a woman, tall and wrapped in a buffalo robe, with silver streaks in her black braid, and deep lines carved into her face like stories left untold. Behind her stood Cole, snow-caked and shivering, his hands trembling from the cold but his eyes fierce with hope. "Move," the woman said, stepping inside. She didn't wait for permission. She knelt by the fire, took Micah from Miriam's arms, and unwrapped him like she'd done it 1,000 times. "Fever," she muttered. "Chest's tight. He's fighting something deep." She pulled dried herbs from a pouch, boiled water in seconds flat, poured in drops from a glass vial that smelled of pine and metal. She worked with speed and reverence, like she knew the price of time. Cole collapsed into the nearest chair, eyes never leaving the baby. Miriam stood behind him, her hand on his shoulder, the first time she'd touched him without fear. The woman pressed a poultice to Micah's chest, dabbed his lips with drops of herbal tincture, and began to chant, not in English, not in French, but in something older, something that made the air in the room shift. "Now we wait," she said at last. "He'll sleep, he'll sweat it out. Come morning, we'll know which direction the tide turned." "Thank you," Miriam said, her voice raw. "What do we owe you?" The woman looked up, her eyes dark and knowing. "You don't owe me. That boy carries more than fever in his blood. Protect him well." Then she turned to Cole. "You already know the storm ain't over. Men are moving. The law's stirring. You'll have to decide again soon what kind of man you want to be." With that, she left, vanishing into the snow like a shadow returning to the forest. And as the wind howled again, and Micah's tiny chest began to rise and fall more steadily, Cole reached up and found Miriam's hand still resting on him. He didn't move. Neither did she. They sat like that through the night. 3 lives stitched together by firelight and fear, and something stronger than both. The knock was not polite. It came at dawn like a hammer on the ribs of a man not yet risen from yesterday's war. 3 solid strikes that echoed through the walls and cracked the fragile peace inside. Cole didn't need to look through the window. He knew who it was. Miriam stood frozen by the hearth, her eyes wide. Micah nestled against her chest, wrapped in the red wool blanket the healer had left behind. Cole stepped to the door and opened it slow, his body blocking the entrance. Sheriff Braddock stood there with 2 deputies behind him, and that same bitter squint like he'd been chewing metal all morning. His hand hovered near his revolver, not drawn, but not relaxed either. "We need to talk, Maddox." Cole didn't move. "Then talk. Out here. No sense bringing the law inside your home, unless you've got reason to be nervous." Cole narrowed his eyes. "Only nervous when the law forgets it's supposed to serve people, not scare them." Braddock tilted his head, amused. "That girl you found in the snow? She ever give you her name?" "She's not a girl," Cole said. "She's a mother." "That right?" Braddock smirked. "Well, that mother's got a man up in Ash Hollow who says she stole from him. Says she lied about who she was, lured him with letters, then showed up with a baby that ain't his, and tried to force a marriage. And he turned her out to die in the snow. His words were she fled in the night, took jewelry from his late wife's box. That's theft. And you believed him?" "Didn't say that," the sheriff said slowly. "Just said the law believes in hearing both sides. That's why I'm here. To take her back for questioning. The judge can sort the rest." Cole stepped outside now, closing the door behind him. His boots crunched the frost still clinging to the porch, and his voice dropped to a low simmer. She carried that child 60 miles through a blizzard. No food, no horse, just sheer will. You think a thief does that? You think a liar walks toward death for a baby that ain't loved?" Braddock's jaw tightened. "This isn't about what I think. It's about the law." "No," Cole said, stepping closer. "It's about the story people tell first. And you're choosing to believe the version written by a coward who couldn't stomach a child that wasn't his blood. She broke a contract, Maddox. Mail-order bride agreements are legal matters. And if she forged papers to hide that child's paternity, did she? You tell me." The 2 men stared at each other in the blue light of morning, breath misting like smoke between them. Then the door creaked behind them. Miriam had stepped out. She looked smaller than she had that first day, not weaker, but stripped down to something raw and true. Her voice was soft. "You want to know if I lied? I did. I said I was alone. I wasn't. But I had to be. I told that man Micah was my cousin's orphan. He wanted a bride, not a burden. And when he saw my son's skin, when he saw the face of his father reflected in those eyes, he sent me away like a dog. I didn't steal from him. That ring he claims was his wife's, it was mine. A gift from Micah's father before the war swallowed him." The deputies looked uncertain now, shifting in their coats. The wind picked up, and for a moment, no one spoke. Braddock's face hardened. "Doesn't matter. There's still charges. I've got orders." "Then you'll have to take her by force," Cole said, his voice like gravel. "And if you do, you'll be dragging a nursing mother away from a baby who nearly died 2 nights ago. That boy carries fever still. You lay hands on her, and he won't make it through the week. That what justice looks like to you?" Braddock's lips pressed thin. One of the deputies cleared his throat. "Sheriff, maybe we let the doc come take a look. Confirm the fever. Delay the ride back a day or 2 on account of the baby's condition." That ain't obstruction. That's compassion. Braddock glared at him, but the man didn't flinch. Neither did the other. Cole saw it. Then, the beginning of doubt. The soft rebellion of men who'd seen too much rigid law do too much damage. Braddock took a long breath. "One day," he muttered. "You've got one day to get your story in order. I'll be back with the judge's word. If it ain't airtight by then, I take her." He turned and stalked off, the deputies trailing behind. Cole waited until their horses vanished over the ridge, then turned to Miriam. She hadn't moved. "I didn't ask you to lie for me," she said. "You didn't have to," he answered. "Some things are worth standing for," her voice broke. "And if they come back? Then we'll be ready. But we won't run. Not anymore." And inside the cabin, the baby stirred, a weak cry that still held fight, still held breath, and that was enough. Night fell with a cold quiet that wrapped the hills like mourning cloth, and inside the cabin the fire cast long, flickering shadows across Miriam's face as she sat beside the cradle, rocking Micah gently, humming a lullaby that seemed older than her voice, older than the grief she wore, like a second skin. Cole sat nearby, sharpening a knife, not because it needed it, but because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. His eyes kept drifting to her, to the lines of fatigue etched into her forehead, the bruises of frostbite still healing across her cheeks. The way she held the child, like she feared the world would rip him away the moment she blinked. "You ever gonna tell me what happened to his father?" he asked finally, voice low, respectful but firm. Miriam didn't look up. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket Micah was swaddled in. For a long moment, he thought she wouldn't answer, but then her voice came like a crack in ice, small and sharp. His name was Eli. He was Cheyenne. Not full, not raised with them, but he carried the blood in him, and the way folks treated him, you'd think he was wearing war paint. She paused, swallowed, then continued. "I met him in Wichita. I was working at a boarding house, changing sheets for men who never looked me in the eye. Eli came in with a busted shoulder, looking for a place to sleep. He didn't have much coin, but he offered to fix the broken stove, mend the fence, anything. I let him stay. He fixed everything but himself." Cole didn't interrupt. He heard the pain moving through her voice like wind through hollow wood. "He was kind like no one had ever been to me. And when he found out I was pregnant, he didn't run. He smiled. Said Micah was going to have the strongest heart on the plains. That's what he called him, his heart." She laughed once, bitter. "Didn't matter. Word got out. Men spat near our feet. Women crossed themselves when they saw me. One night, 2 drunks followed him out behind the tavern. I found him in the mud, still breathing, but not for long. He held my hand and whispered that it wasn't my fault, but I never believed him." The cradle creaked as she stood slowly and tucked the blanket around Micah's chin. "I buried him myself. Then I packed what little I had, found a mail order listing, and lied my way into someone's promise. I thought maybe I could outrun the past if I didn't speak it out loud." Cole stood too, walking to the window and staring out into the dark. "That sheriff comes back with that judge's order. He won't care what you buried or why. They'll see a woman with a child and a missing ring and call it all a scheme." Miriam stepped behind him, her voice quiet but steady. "You think I don't know that? You think I haven't lived with that fear pressing against my ribs every night I slept under another stranger's roof? Then why tell me now?" "Because you asked, and because you haven't lied to me once." Cole turned to face her. "Neither have you. Not really. Not where it counted." She gave a tired smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That ring he claimed I stole it was Eli's. A Cheyenne silversmith made it for him, said it carried protection. He slipped it on my finger before he died. Said if I ever found somewhere worth staying, I'd know because the wind would quiet. It hasn't yet." Cole's gaze drifted to the cradle. Micah stirred, coughed once, then settled again. "He's got his father's eyes, hasn't he?" Miriam nodded. "And his fire. That boy survived snow and hunger and men who didn't want him born. He's more alive than any man I've ever known." Cole crossed the room and knelt by the cradle. Micah's tiny fist had found the edge of the blanket and curled around it like it was a lifeline. "He's got a home here, if you'll have it. Both of you." Miriam didn't answer right away. She looked at Cole for a long time, as if trying to decide whether he was offering out of pity or something else. Finally, she spoke, voice hoarse. "What happens when the law says otherwise?" Cole's jaw tightened. "Then the law will have to fight for you. And I don't lose fights I believe in." A silence settled over them. Not heavy this time, but deep, like something sacred had passed between them, without needing to be named. Outside, the wind howled along the ridge, but inside the cabin, it was still. A fire cracked. A child breathed. And two broken souls stood in a room that no longer felt like refuge alone, but like the beginning of something unspoken, something earned through storms and silence and the long road of truth. The sound of hooves shattered the stillness of morning, iron striking frozen earth with a rhythm too practiced to belong to a neighbor. Cole was at the door before the second horse cleared the ridge, his fingers closing around the rifle he hadn't needed since spring. He didn't have to see the badge to know who it was. He could feel it in his bones, like winter sinking back into his blood. Sheriff Raylan came with 2 deputies, and a leather satchel he slapped against his thigh as he dismounted. "Maddox," he called, calm as always, but his eyes already scanning the cabin windows. "We're here for the girl." Cole stepped outside, closing the door behind him, his breath rising in puffs that vanished too quickly. "She's not a girl. She's a woman, and she's not yours to take." Raylan raised an eyebrow and took another slow step forward, boots crunching through ice. "Got a writ from Judge Pierce says otherwise. Says she's got no legal claim to that child, no marriage certificate, no family to vouch for her. That makes her a vagrant in possession of someone else's blood." Cole's jaw locked tight, and he could feel the heat in his chest rising, slow and thick. "You know what she walked through to get here? 60 miles in snow, with that baby tied to her chest. And not once did she beg, not once did she lie. You think that kind of woman deserves to be dragged back into town in chains?" One of the deputies snorted. "We're not here to debate what she deserves. Just here to do the law's bidding." Raylan sighed like a man who didn't enjoy the job but didn't shy from it either. "Look, Cole, I know you've been on the edge since the war. You took in that Apache boy back in '72 when nobody else would. Built this place with your hands when the world had given up on you. I get it. But this isn't about mercy. It's about order. And if we lose that, we lose the whole damn frontier." Cole stepped off the porch, rifle still lowered but eyes steady. "Maybe the frontier needs to be lost, Raylan. Maybe what we're building isn't order, it's just a prettier kind of cruelty." The wind stirred hard, sweeping up snow like a veil and brushing it across their boots. From inside, Miriam was watching. She held Micah close, her body pressed to the wall, heart hammering like it could crack through her ribs. She knew this sound, this standoff rhythm, where men talked with too much silence between words. Raylan finally nodded at one of the deputies, who swung his leg off the horse and started toward the cabin. That's when Cole raised the rifle. "Not one more step," the man froze. "You gonna shoot an officer?" "I'm gonna protect my land," Cole said quietly. "And everyone on it." Raylan held up a hand. "Let's not do this, Cole. That boy has Cheyenne blood. You know what that means to the circuit judges. You think they'll give her a fair hearing? You think she can walk into that courtroom with a half-native child and not get crushed under the weight of 10 white men's silence?" Cole didn't blink. "Then why take her at all?" Raylan's jaw twitched. "Because if I don't, Pierce will send someone who doesn't ask first, someone who shoots before they knock." Cole lowered the rifle just an inch. "Then give me a day. Let me talk to the council. Let me make the case." Raylan looked past him to the door, to the sliver of curtain where a child's hand was barely visible against the glass. He blew out a breath. "You got till sundown. Then I come back. And I won't come alone." As the riders turned and vanished into the trees, Cole stood in the cold long after the sound of their hooves had faded. When he went back inside, Miriam was still by the wall, her arms around Micah like a shield made of flesh and bone. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "You could have been killed." Cole set the rifle down gently. "I'm already dead if I let them take you." Her eyes filled, but she blinked it back. "They won't stop. Neither will I." He crossed to the table, unfolding a map and circling something with a calloused finger. "There's a family rancher's near Black Hollow. part Cherokee. They've got friends on both sides of the law. If we can get you there, maybe. Miriam stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. No, I'm done running. If I keep running, Micah grows up thinking he's something to hide. I want him to know that someone stood, even if it cost her. Cole looked at her for a long time, then nodded once. Then we make our stand. Outside, the snow began again, soft and steady. But inside the cabin, something else took root. Not fear, not flight, but the beginning of resistance, shaped in quiet, forged in love, and lit like a flame that would not die even when the law came knocking. The sun was dragging low across the sky like a wounded animal, bleeding gold and rust over the ridges as Cole tightened the saddle cinch with fingers that had stopped trembling hours ago. He hadn't spoken much since morning, just sharpened the axes, checked the rifle chamber again and again, and stood outside the cabin as if measuring the shadows for what they might bring. Miriam moved behind him quietly, wrapping Micah in layers of wool too thick for a child to breathe through, but she didn't loosen the knots. The baby didn't fuss. He hadn't since dawn, like even his little bones understood what the wind carried today. We could still go, she whispered, and though her voice was small, it was steel underneath. You could take us out the back trail. You know the woods better than any man. You could vanish. Cole turned slowly, eyes shaded beneath the brim of his hat, face unreadable but heavy with thought. If we vanish, they hunt. If we stay, they decide. But if we stand then, maybe for once, they listen. Her breath caught, but she didn't argue. She nodded once and placed Micah in the cradle near the fire. The child blinked up at her with wide, solemn eyes, the kind that carried too much memory for someone not yet walking. She kissed his forehead and turned away before she changed her mind. Cole stood at the door with his rifle in one hand and a sawed-off tucked into the waistband at his back. When she stepped beside him, he glanced sideways. You don't have to be here when it happens. I already am, she said. And so's he. So let's meet it. The hooves came again, not fast, but sure, like a funeral march that had already decided who was guilty. Raylan rode in front, alone this time, but 10 men followed behind. Not all were deputies. Some were townsfolk who'd tied lawmen's scarves around their arms, eager for a piece of righteousness without ever having to look it in the eye. One carried a rope. One had a shotgun resting easy in his hands. Raylan pulled up just shy of the porch. Cole, he said flatly, you had your day. What's it going to be? Cole stepped forward until his boots creaked on the snow-covered steps. You bring a court with you? We bring the law. Then where's her trial? Cole asked. Where's the man who promised her marriage and threw her out in the snow when he saw Micah's skin? Where's his name on that paper in your satchel? Raylan looked down, then back up, voice tight. The judge said, the judge don't know the wind up here. Don't know what it takes to bury a child when you don't even have wood to burn. She walked 60 miles to keep that boy alive. You want to call that a crime? It's not about the walk, Raylan snapped, some fire finally leaking through. It's about the blood. You know what this town's been like since the treaty fell apart. You know what happens if we start sheltering outlaws, half-breeds, runaways. They become neighbors, Cole cut in. If we're decent, if we're not, they become ghosts. Miriam stepped beside him then, no longer hiding, no longer trembling. She held nothing in her hands, but her presence felt like thunder behind him. His name is Micah. He didn't ask to be born, didn't ask to be judged by men who never knew love deep enough to cross a border for. But I did, and I'll carry that forever. But I won't run anymore. The man with the rope shifted, muttering, but Raylan silenced him with a hand. Then he looked at Miriam for a long time longer than any of them expected, and something old and tired settled in his eyes. You know what'll happen if I go back empty? Yeah, Cole said. You'll get reassigned, or buried in paper, or worse, they'll send someone colder. Someone who shoots before he knocks, Miriam said softly. Raylan exhaled, and for a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then he dismounted slowly, reached into his saddlebag, and pulled out the writ. He tore it in half, then again, then dropped it into the snow. This never happened, he said. But don't expect this town to stay quiet about it. Some men are louder than paper. So are hearts, Miriam whispered. Raylan climbed back on his horse. Raise that boy right. Make me wish I had the spine to do more. And then he turned and rode out, the others following, some confused, some scowling, none daring to speak. When they were gone, Cole closed the cabin door and locked it behind him, not out of fear, but to hold in the moment. Miriam sat by the fire and picked up Micah, rocking him gently as the child drifted off to sleep. He chose, she whispered. He chose us. Cole sat beside her, not touching her but close enough to feel the warmth of her presence, and the firelight danced on the cradle, casting long shadows that no longer felt like threats but like echoes of a storm that had passed. The wind had gone quiet by morning, not because the storm had passed but because the land had held its breath, waiting to see what kind of day would rise after a night like that. Cole rose before the frost melted off the porch, stepping outside with a cup of bitter coffee and eyes that scanned the tree line like he still expected a figure to return and say he'd changed his mind. But Raylan hadn't come back, and the hills remained undisturbed. The world, it seemed, had decided to move forward, whether the people in it were ready or not. Inside, Miriam sat cross-legged near the hearth, her skirts spread out like a field of ash and flannel, with Micah nestled in the crook of her arm. He was breathing easier now, though still a little too still, like the fever had stolen part of his strength and was waiting to see if it should return. Miriam whispered stories in his ear when she thought Cole couldn't hear, tales about stars that guided women walking alone and wolves that turned away from babies left under trees. As though the child needed more than milk and fire, he needed myths to fight whatever darkness still clung to him. Cole watched her for a long time before he spoke, voice quiet, almost like apology. You never told me what happened in Bridge Creek. She looked up, fingers tightening around Micah just slightly, like instinct. Then she exhaled. Because I didn't want it to be real. It was the man. He was waiting with a preacher, she said, her voice flat like a blade. I thought that meant something. But when he saw Micah, he laughed. Said I could keep the brat, but the deal was off. Called him a squaw baby. Told me to get gone before his wife got back. Cole flinched at that. Not just the words, but the weight behind them. He had a wife? Turns out she was away, burying their second stillborn, Miriam said bitterly. He was just lonely. He wanted company, not a family. Didn't think I'd show up with one in my arms. Didn't care that Micah's father died protecting me. Cole knelt beside her, watching the flicker of flame in her eyes. Did you love him? Micah's father? Her lips pressed together, and for a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. But then she nodded slowly. He was kind. He was tired. He'd lost too much and trusted too little. But he stayed when I was sick, carried me when my feet bled. When we got to that town where the snow started, he left to find a doctor. He never came back. Folks said a white man slit his throat for giving me his coat. Cole leaned back, breathing heavy through his nose, trying to absorb the story without cursing the world that birthed it. You don't have to explain yourself. Not to me. But I want to, she said, eyes meeting his. You should know what kind of story you're stepping into. I'm not stepping into anything, he replied. I've been standing here. That boy, he ain't some burden I was tricked into carrying. He's the first reason I've had in a long time to stay awake at night and not hate the dawn. She blinked, and the silence between them turned softer, like snow landing on an old wound. Then she reached for something tucked into her boot, a piece of folded paper, worn at the edges but still sealed with wax. This came with me, she said, from the last place we stopped. There was a man there, native, older than any tree I've seen. He said to give this to the man who opened his door to us without asking who we were. Cole hesitated, then took the letter gently, breaking the wax and unfolding it with careful fingers. The handwriting was uneven, scrawled like someone had written it in the dark. It read, "This child carries blood you do not understand. If you take him in, you become part of a story that stretches long before fences. Protect him not because the law says so, but because your own blood once needed the same. Keep him warm. Keep him wise. And remember, some legacies are louder than names." Cole read it twice, then folded it back with reverence, pressing it to his chest. Do you know what it means? She shook her head. But I believe it. So do I. That night, Cole laid Micah in his own bed and sat up by the fire while Miriam drifted to sleep in the rocking chair. He held the letter like a compass, something to measure himself against when the wind started to howl again. He didn't know what was coming. But he knew this whatever storm lay ahead, they'd already walked through worse. And from now on, they'd walk through it together. Snow had crusted the trees in silence, the kind that swallowed breath and dared the world to speak above a whisper, when the first sound of hooves broke across the ridgeline. Cole was splitting logs when he heard it steady, practiced, not the stumble of a traveler but the confidence of someone riding in like he had a right to be there. By the time he reached the front porch, axe still in hand, Sheriff Denton was already dismounting, brushing frost off his coat like the law itself didn't answer to weather. His eyes were flint behind the brim of his hat, gaze scanning the cabin windows before landing square on Cole. "Heard you had visitors," the sheriff said flatly. "Can't say that's unusual with storms like this," Cole replied, shoulders stiff. "Folks find shelter where they can." "Depends what kind of folks," Denton muttered, tying his reins slow. "Saw tracks up the pass, woman's footprints, mostly dragging by the end, and a set so small I thought they was rabbit prints till I looked close. Been asking around. Seems a bride didn't show up in Bridge Creek. Left a man high and dry, claiming he got scammed. Said the woman ran off with someone else's baby." Cole's jaw twitched. "That what he said?" "That's what he swore on the Bible," Denton said, stepping up the porch. "You gonna invite me in, or should I assume the fire inside's warming more than just you?" Cole didn't move. "You come here to talk or to arrest somebody?" "That depends on what I find." The door opened behind them before Cole could answer. Miriam stood there, wrapped in the thick wool blanket, her eyes hollow but unflinching. She didn't flinch at the sight of the badge, didn't back down. She just stepped aside and let the law walk into the warmth like it was his right. Micah was asleep by the hearth, wrapped in soft quilts, with one tiny hand curled into a fist on Cole's old pillow. Denton's eyes lingered there longer than necessary, then swept back to Miriam. "You got a name?" "Names don't matter out here, do they?" she replied quietly. "Only choices." Denton gave a thin smile. "You chose to disappear from a man who paid for a wife. That's fraud in some counties. And he chose to spit on a child too small to cry." She snapped. "That fraud?" Cole's voice was low but dangerous. "You come here for justice or convenience, Sheriff?" Denton's hand hovered near his coat where his pistol rested, but he didn't draw. "You know me, Cole. I keep peace. I don't write the rules, I enforce the ones I'm handed." "Then maybe you need a new pen," Cole said. "'Cause the ones written out there don't know a damn thing about what happened in here." The sheriff looked around again, at the burn scars on Miriam's hands, at the bundle by the fire, at the axe still gripped tight in Cole's fist. Then he sighed and walked over to the chair near the stove, easing into it like his bones remembered a different version of this place. "We all got blood on our hands," he murmured. "Most folks just learned to wear gloves." He looked up at Miriam. "The law says you're a runaway. Says I should bring you back. But the law's never carried a sick baby through a storm." She didn't speak, but her breath caught, and her grip on the blanket trembled. Denton looked at Cole then, not as a sheriff, but as a man. "You vouch for her?" "I stake my land on her," Cole said without hesitation. "And that boy?" "That boy's the reason I got up this morning." There was a long pause, then, the kind where decisions are made that don't get written in any book. The sheriff stood again, dusted snow off his boots, and walked to the door. "No sense in filing reports on people nobody saw." "Appreciate that," Cole said. "But you didn't see the letter, did you?" Denton stopped at the threshold. "What letter?" Cole pulled it from the mantel and handed it over. The sheriff read it twice, the second time slower, mouth tightening. "That old man, he was from the Cheyenne?" Miriam nodded. "He said Micah's blood could open old wounds or close them forever." Denton folded the letter, handed it back like it was something sacred. "Then you best keep him safe, because folks won't understand. They'll see what they want and shoot before asking names." "That's why we stay here," Cole said. "Quiet, small, and out of reach." Denton gave a slow nod, then opened the door. "You got snow coming again. Keep the wood stocked. And if anyone asks, I never came up this ridge." Miriam stepped forward. "Why are you helping us?" Denton didn't turn. Because once a woman like you gave my sister her last blanket. Didn't ask where we came from. Just wrapped her up and said, 'You're home now.' I never forgot that." Then he rode off into the white, swallowed by snow and silence. Inside, Cole shut the door and slid the bolt. Micah stirred in his sleep, and Miriam whispered his name like a prayer. Cole didn't say anything. He just knelt beside the boy and let his hand rest over the tiny heartbeat that now pulsed stronger than any fear in the room. The snow hadn't let up for 2 days, piling higher against the windows, muting the wind like wool stuffed in a wound. And inside the cabin the warmth clung desperately to the walls as Miriam sat with Micah draped across her lap, his tiny body burning beneath the blanket. She hadn't moved in hours, barely blinked. One hand gripping a cool cloth, she pressed again and again to the child's brow, and every time she pulled it away, she prayed the fire in his skin would dim, that the rasp in his lungs would ease. But the fever was a devil now, and it had buried itself deep. Cole had said nothing all morning, but she knew by the tightness in his jaw, by the way he stirred the fire harder than he needed to, that he was afraid too. "He was coughing before I ever left the station," she whispered at last. Not even sure she'd meant to say it aloud, but Cole heard. "I thought it was just the cold." He was breathing shallow, and I didn't have anything but a thin shawl to wrap him in. "You walked 60 miles with a baby who was already sick," Cole said, crouching beside her now, voice low. "You shouldn't have had to." "I couldn't stay," she said, eyes full of a guilt that hadn't lifted since the day she ran. Not after he looked at Micah like he was dirt, like he was some mistake. She didn't say the man's name. She didn't need to. The rejection still bled beneath her skin, stitched into every mile she'd walked. Cole reached out, his hand hovering a moment before he touched Micah's back gently. "His breathing's worse." Miriam nodded, brushing tears off her face with the edge of the cloth. "I don't know what else to do. There's an old woman out past Widow's Peak," Cole said suddenly. "They call her Aunt Esme. Knows herbs better than any doctor I've met. Some say she's half crow. Some say she just listens better to plants than to people. Either way, she saved my brother from scarlet fever when he was a boy." Miriam looked up, eyes wild with hope and fear tangled tight. "Can she help him?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I'll get her here." "It's too dangerous," Miriam said quickly, glancing to the window where snow beat sideways against the glass like a curse. "That trail's nearly impassable when the sky turns like this." Cole stood, grabbing his coat and hat, voice resolute. "Then I'll make it passable. I'm not letting him die on my floor." She reached for his hand as he passed. "Please, just come back. Both of you. Don't let the mountain take you." Cole paused, looking down at her with something sharp and gentle in his gaze, like flint wrapped in velvet. "It's not going to take anyone today." Then he was gone, doors slamming behind him, swallowed by white and wind and the stubborn thud of his boots carving through the storm. Miriam stared at the fire. It cracked and sighed like an old man praying in a foreign tongue, and beside her, Micah whimpered, body twitching under the fever's grip. She gathered him closer, pressing her lips to his forehead, whispering the name the old man in the Dakota camp had given him, the one he said belonged to a great warrior who died too young. "Little Elk," she murmured, "you stay with me. You hear me? Don't you dare leave. You didn't walk through fire and snow just to give up now." The wind howled harder. Outside, Cole's form vanished into the distance, swallowed by trees and silence. The trail to Aunt Esme's hut was narrow, flanked by ridges that slid without warning, and the horse bucked twice before Cole got him steady, leaning low against the animal's mane as if warmth and balance were the same thing. The climb was cruel, the wind worse, but worse still was the image that drove him forward, the sound of Micah gasping, the way Miriam had looked, like the breath was leaving her one heartbeat at a time. By the time he reached the ridge, Cole's hands were frozen around the reins, lips cracked from cold, and he nearly missed the firelight dancing through the curtain of snow that marked Esme's lodge. The old woman was outside already, shawl heavy with frost, eyes sharp as obsidian. "I knew someone was coming," she said without asking. "A child, right? He's burning up," Cole rasped. "Half dead by now. Then why are we standing here?" She barked, already moving, already packing, and within minutes she was on the back of his horse, sat behind him like she'd ridden winters like this since birth. They spoke no more. The snow parted only enough to let them pass, as if the mountain itself knew this ride mattered more than most. Back at the cabin, Miriam had rocked Micah into a near silence, his breathing thready, like wind through a broken flute. The moment the door burst open and Esme entered trailing cedar and smoke and snowmelt, Miriam's body sagged in relief so total it hurt. Esme knelt, unwrapping herbs from her satchel, fingers swift and sure. "Boil water," she barked. "Fetch me cloth. This boy's not going yet." Miriam obeyed, hands moving before thought, and Cole poured water as Esme brewed tinctures and crushed dried roots. The air filled with strange, sense-bitter, earthy, sacred, and all night they worked as the storm screamed and time dragged its feet. And just before dawn, Micah's breath eased, not perfect, but slower, deeper, alive. Miriam wept without noise, and Cole knelt beside her, brushing her hair back with a hand that had never once known softness till now. "He's staying," she whispered. "He's choosing to stay." Cole nodded, voice hoarse. "So am I." The knock on the door came at first light, not a pounding threat but a slow, deliberate rhythm that made Miriam's spine stiffen where she sat beside Micah's cot. The boy still dozing, his skin cooler now, his little chest rising with the kind of breath she'd prayed for. Cole was already up, rifle in hand, not raised, just cradled low, like something that belonged in his arms. Like part of him knew what kind of man stood behind that door without needing to ask. He gave Miriam a look, not a warning, not fear but something quieter, steadier, a message carved in silence. No matter who it is, we don't flinch. Then he opened the door, and there he stood. Sheriff Rucklin, tall and solid as a chopping stump, coat dusted with snow and eyes squinting like the sun itself, owed him something. He didn't step in, just stood there, with the cold pouring in around his boots. "Morning, Maddox," he said, voice low, graveled like dried creek bed. "I heard from town that a woman came through the North Trail dragging a baby behind her." Cole didn't answer at first, just shifted slightly to block the sheriff's line of sight deeper into the cabin. "You came all the way up here just to confirm rumors?" "Came up here because that woman's supposed to be the property part in the term of a man named Virgil Sims, and he's filed a claim. Says she was betrothed, left without notice, took what wasn't hers." At that Miriam rose, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she wouldn't be hidden anymore. She moved to stand beside Cole, her frame pale and slender but unmoving, like something carved out of survival and winter. "I'm not his property," she said, and her voice was not angry, just tired. "And I didn't take anything that wasn't already mine." Rucklin looked at her, his eyes calculating, but his shoulders dropped a little. He wasn't a cruel man, just one too used to rules. "There's a law," he muttered. "Law says a man's word, once signed, means something. Law also says a man can't reject a child because he's born of a different blood," Cole said, stepping forward now, voice quiet but edged. "You know what Sims told her when he saw that boy? Called him a stain. Told her to walk." "That ain't written down in the ledger," Rucklin replied, but there was something in his tone that cracked just slightly. "Still, I gotta ask, that child, he yours?" The question sat heavy in the room. Miriam could feel Cole shift beside her, not startled, not offended, just still. He looked at the sheriff then, and the words came simple, "Not by blood. But I reckon I'm the one that sat up all night when he stopped breathing. I'm the one fetched Esme from Widow's Peak. I'm the one building a crib in the other room. So if you're asking me if he's mine, then yeah, I guess he is." Rucklin's jaw tightened. He looked down at the floorboards, then back up. "Sims says he'll press charges. Says she breached contract, that she kidnapped the boy. Then he'll have to say it in front of the child," Miriam said suddenly, stepping forward. "He'll have to look Micah in the eye and tell him he wasn't wanted, that his blood was wrong, that he had no right to be born. Can you deliver that message, Sheriff?" The silence that followed was thick. Rucklin's eyes darted between them and woman, child, and whatever wires had been pulling him toward duty started to fray. He cleared his throat. "I didn't see anyone fitting that description. he said finally. And this snow's gonna bury any prints soon. I might head back before the trail turns. You'll be welcome for coffee next time, Cole said, not smiling, but the weight in the room shifted. Ruckland nodded once, turned, and walked away. The door closed gently behind him, and Miriam sagged into the wall, shaking now with the relief she hadn't let herself feel until the danger passed. Cole turned to her. We'll need to be smart. Word will spread. Sims won't stop. I don't care, she said, moving to Micah and kneeling by his side again. Let them come. We'll be here. We'll be whole. Cole knelt beside her, hand finding hers like it always belonged there. The cabin creaked in the wind, but inside the air was warm with more than fire. Outside, the sheriff paused by his horse, pulled something from his Kawada folded paper. The contract Sims had filed. Slowly, deliberately, he struck a match, held it to the edge, watched the flame eat the ink like winter devours leaves. Then he mounted and rode back toward town, empty-handed but lighter than when he'd come. The sun came late that morning, filtered through a sky still heavy with the storm's breath, but it broke through enough to throw soft light across the cabin floorboards, touching the child's blanket with a glow so golden Miriam thought it might have been a sign. She sat beside the cradle, Cole's cradle now, though he wouldn't say it like that, carved from cedar with hands that hadn't shaped anything but fences and firewood in years, yet held each curve like they were building something sacred. The baby stirred, not crying this time, just a soft squeak, like he was waking into something warmer than where he'd been. And Miriam touched his cheek with fingers that didn't tremble anymore. He needs a name, she said, not looking up, voice steady but quiet like the fire. He can't keep being boy forever. Cole was at the stove, hands still dusty from chopping wood, and he didn't turn right away. You had one in mind? She hesitated. I wanted to name him something strong, not like his father, not like the past. Something new. Cole came to stand behind her, wiping his palms on the cloth at his hip, then kneeling slowly so he was beside her. He didn't speak yet, just looked at the child who now clung to life like he had roots in it. I thought about Eli, she said finally. Means uplifted, strong in spirit. Cole nodded. Micah Eli. She looked at him then. You remember I said his name was Micah? You said it once, when he was burning up. You whispered it like a prayer. She reached out and touched the baby's hair. I think he heard it too. I think that's what brought him back. Cole was silent for a long time. Then he looked up at her, something unspoken in his eyes that had nothing to do with names and everything to do with the days behind them and the road ahead. You ever think of giving him your name? She blinked. My name? Yeah, as his mother. Not what some man left behind. She swallowed. I don't even know what that would be anymore. Then maybe we make one. Her breath caught, just a little. Not in fear, but in something deeper like. A door creaked open in the dark, and light spilled in, warm and strange and beckoning. You saying that, as someone who wants to help, she said slowly, or someone who wants to stay. Cole looked at her. The space between them, nothing now. I'm saying it as someone who watched a woman carry a baby 60 miles through ice and wolves and shame and still fight for him when she was half dead. I'm saying it as someone who'd be a fool not to stand beside that. Miriam looked down. The baby was staring up at her, blinking slow and calm, like he already knew the answer. Miriam Eli, she said. Micah Eli Maddox. Cole didn't flinch. That's a fine name. The moment held there, stretched taut with something unspoken but understood. And then the knock came again. This time it was soft. A woman's knock. When Cole opened the door, it was Esme, cheeks pink from the walk, her shawl pulled tight but her eyes bright with something more than cold. Came to check on the boy, she said, glancing behind Cole into the warmth. Brought some of my rosehip tonic, too. Should help his lungs. Cole stepped aside, and Esme entered with the grace of someone who'd seen more births and deaths than she ever told about. She went to Micah, looked down at him with a smile like a midwife might, fierce and gentle all at once. Well now, she whispered, you weren't ready to go yet, were you? Then her eyes slid to Miriam. And you held on. Miriam nodded, but the tears came then, silent and slow. He wouldn't let go, she said. even when I thought we were both done." Esme took her hand. "That's how you know he's yours. Not by blood, by the ones who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself." The three of them stood in a triangle around the child. The air inside the cabin heavy with something stronger than winter. Something that made Cole feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the family he never thought he deserved. "You'll need to bless him," Esme said, looking between them. "Proper name, proper blessing. Not for God's sake, for his. So he knows where he belongs." Cole reached for the canteen by the fire, filled with melted snow boiled down pure. He brought it over and held it out to Miriam. She looked at him, then took it in her hands. With a finger, she dipped into the water and traced a small circle on Micah's forehead. "You are Micah Eli Maddox," she whispered. "You are not forgotten, not a mistake. You are chosen. You are loved." Cole placed a hand on the tiny blanket. "You're home now, son." The fire crackled louder, and the wind outside softened. In that little room in the middle of a brutal land, something whole had begun. Not finished. Not perfect. But whole. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. If this story touched you, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and let us feel a little closer across the miles. Every story finds its home in the hearts of those who need it, and sometimes that's all it takes. If you'd like to hear more stories that lift the spirit and remind us of the quiet miracles around us, feel free to subscribe. We're building something meaningful here, and it means so much to have you along the way. From our hearts to yours, thank you for spending this time with us.